Nowadays it's really easy to like search everything. Like it's a Google search away, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that like we understand the information fully. And it would be kind of nice to have you explain the concept as a teacher, like in more simpler terms where we can understand it. It's a bit niche, but I've been getting a lot of articles about the most random thing, and I Googled it and Googled it. I still don't understand the importance. But I keep getting articles about cicadas and how they're erupting. And I'm like, what are cicadas? Why are they erupting? Why is everybody making a big deal? Like, I see like two,
Oh
three
yeah.
articles a day.
So there's like a particular brood is emerging this summer, and cicadas are just an insect, and oh man, I can literally talk about this for so long because this is really cool. Um, so they are just an insect. So we're going to talk about something slightly different, but it's related to cicadas, I promise. So I'm writing a book right now called Facts That Aren't True. And one of the untrue facts is that flies live for 24 hours. They don't. Houseflies can live for like a month. But the thing we kind of forget about insects is that we think of like a butterfly metamorphosizes, right? It goes from caterpillar to butterfly. But actually, pretty much all insects undergo some sort of transformation because they start off as a larva, and the larva is nothing like the adult. So, like for flies, they start off as a maggot, right? Or a pupa, then a maggot, or whatever it is, and then eventually they become the fly. They spend the majority of their life as that in that larval stage, right? Another famous one is like the mayfly. They, in as adults with wings, they will only live for about 24-ish hours, but they spend many, many years actually as a larva with no wings, and they live in the water, and they come out as adults with wings. They don't even have mouths because they don't eat, because the only point of being an adult with wings is to fly around, find a mate, reproduce, and then lay eggs. The cycle starts over again. Cicadas take that to the extreme. Cicadas latch onto tree roots under the ground, and they drink this stuff called xylem. And xylem is pretty much just water. It's watery stuff, extremely devoid of nutrients that they have pipes that go all the way up and down them to transport that water around because living things need water, right? So they bite on a tree root and they suck on xylem for 7 to 11, or is it 11 or 13? I don't remember. I know it's a prime number, either 7 years, 11 years, or 13 years. I can't remember exactly. They spend that long just sucking on that stuff because it's so nutrient poor, and then they come out of the ground. Now, that prime number thing with the like incubation period or whatever we want to call that, that's really important because a cool thing about prime numbers is neighboring prime numbers do not have a close least common multiple. So, well, typically they don't. Like 2 and 3, their least common multiple is 6. That's pretty close, right? But for 7 and 11, or like I said, it's either that or 11 or 13. I don't remember. I think it's 11 and 13 actually, because the least common multiple between them is hundreds of years, whatever 11 times 13 is, right? So that's really important because it makes it so that these organisms can exist in the same ecosystem but not compete with each other. Because like for example, let's say like a tree, there are birds that live in the very top in the canopy. There are other birds that live on the bottom low branches, and then there are still other birds that peck holes in the tree and live inside of it. So they can all live in the same place, but they're not competing, or like they're all living in the same tree, but they're not competing, so they can coexist. With cicadas, you can look up maps of the broods or whatever. They overlap, but it's not a problem because they don't compete for resources because of that prime number incubation period or whatever. They come out of the ground at, odds are it will not be on a year that overlaps. It only happens every many, 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 many decades, whatever it is. So that's basically a strategy that has been wired into them through evolution. And it's a really excellent example of like organisms avoiding competition, I guess.
So is this year one of the years where they overlap and come out at the same time?
I think so. Which it's funny because last year was too, but there are many, 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 many broods. Most years there's no overlap, but are there cicada broods that are coming out at the same time this summer? I'm asking ChatGPT for. So, yes, two separate cicada broods are emerging simultaneously this summer. And yeah, it's 17 and 13 year cycles. That makes sense because 17 and 13 have a least common multiple of 221. So it's very rare that they overlap.
Thank you. I know it's available on the internet, but it's another thing to have it like explained by an actual teacher. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And yeah, sometimes people that write articles don't really write them in a way that's very easy to understand.
I'm a fellow non-believer in the God thing, and every once in a while, I like having pleasant chit chats with religious people. You know, I don't always try to debate them; just hear their views. It's interesting. And one of them made a claim that there is, and I just wanted to ask your opinion on it. And that's all I want to know. One of them made a claim recently to me that there's proof for Noah that Moses parting the Red Sea because there are Bronze Age weapons at the bottom of the sea. Have you heard anything about that? Like, is this a common lie? What do you think about it? And that's my
Yes,
question.
I've heard it. It is just simply not true. There aren't any. This comes from Ron Wyatt, who was a nurse from Texas who claims he discovered, I can't even keep track of how many things, and he never discovered jack shit. But it's usually that they found a wagon wheel. That's the most common one. And from what I've heard, it's just simply a piece of coral that looks like it could be the like decrepit remnants of a chariot wheel or whatever. I think I said wagon wheel, but I meant chariot wheel or whatever.
Yeah.
But even if it was, what would that prove? That a chariot is in the Red Sea? Egypt used chariots for many, many, many centuries. I don't think it was quite millennia, but maybe it was like a millennia and a half or something like that. So that would prove absolutely nothing in particular. You can say it is supporting evidence of it, but of the weakest kind. So here's the example I usually give, and this is what you could say to somebody. You know the story of George Washington cutting down the cherry tree?
Yeah, that's a lie.
Right. But what if I told you that at Mount Vernon, they did find an axe buried in the ground?
Oh God, that changes a lot.
So
um,
you can say that that is supporting evidence, and it is, but of just the most fleeting variety of
yeah,
evidence. So it's the same thing.
yeah, yeah. Because like it was interesting though, because when he made that claim, I was like, all right, I'm gonna look more into that. Because I just like learning. Like maybe he had a point, and he said he would DM me his evidence, and then he never did. I don't know. Maybe he was busy. Anyway, that's my question. Thank you.
What do you think is that most people don't understand about science or like misuse science, right?
Hmm.
Because we've got all
That's a
this
really good
great science
question.
in the world,
Yeah.
but you know, people seem to
I think
apply it wrong
probably
or apply it for their conclusions, right?
I think probably people just fundamentally cannot grasp the scope of science. And what I would sort of mean by that is when I say the scientific consensus is that Earth is billions of years old, that's not an appeal to popularity fallacy. It's not a bandwagon fallacy. It's not an appeal to authority fallacy because like science is a process. What I'm appealing to is the rigorous method that went into discovering that. The
Right.
literally millions of man hours that went into it. And Yuval Noah
Right.
Harari, in his book, I think it's 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, says it's like the very first words of the book, I believe. He says, people don't think in equations. People think in stories. And the simpler the
Yes.
story, the better, or the more effective it is. And
Hmm.
so dumb, cheap narratives that you hear from every like point of view, every side of the political spectrum or whatever, are talking points, cheap rhetorical tricks, things that rhyme, or whatever, are far more effective at getting people to get behind an idea or believe in an idea than just being presented with the data. Because we literally, biologically, that's literally not how we function.
Yeah, we're not used to dealing with
Yeah.
brute facts and stuff like that,
Yeah.
or whatever.
And you can't, like,
Okay.
for example, if you want people to donate to a charity, what you'd think
Hmm.
what you'd think would be the most effective thing to do would be to do an enormous study and show people exactly how many people are dying or suffering from something,
Right. Like
and
effective altruism, right?
yeah, and show them exactly how just a small donation would cause whatever. But you know, it's literally thousands of times more effective. Show a single picture of a single person affected by it, and
Hmm.
emotionally, you will make people get behind something, because
Okay.
that's just not how we work at all.
And that leads me then to the question: if we are kind of naturally inclined to narrativize, right? Because our, I don't want to like get too much into the evolution of this, but we've probably like evolved like sharing stories with each other and whatever. We have some natural inclination for this for whatever reason.
Yeah.
How do we then deal with like certain narratives being the flat earth would be a good example. I don't want to get into too much of a political one, but the flat earth to these people seems like a very sufficient explanation, but it's a type of story. It's a type of story that, how do you counter that then? How do you have this longer conversation where you kind of like are more demonstrative, I guess? I feel like what you're describing is that people are much more motivated by their intuitions and their emotional appeals, right?
Yeah,
And
I
so,
would say so. Yeah.
how do we kind of counteract this
Oh,
inclination for
okay,
people to
that
make
makes
these
sense.
mental shortcuts? Let's put it like that.
Well, I mean, the most effective way, and like if you read books about like how to change people's minds and stuff like that, I've never read any of those books or whatever, but from what I've heard people
Hmm.
say, the most effective thing is to appeal to people's sensibilities, values, and beliefs in the first place, right? So,
Interesting.
like for example, Dr. Martin Luther King. This isn't science, but I think the the point
Interesting
the
case
point
study.
goes. Yeah, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was, if you go and listen to his speeches, they are centered around uh, biblical teachings, Jesus's moral philosophies, and his speeches are deeply patriotic. That is not at
Yes. Yeah.
all what you hear people who are trying to enact social change today talk about. It is the only thing you hear today is, and it happens on both sides. I'm not just saying the left does this. The right obviously does that. Does this same thing too. They say the other side is an existential threat. What they believe in is bad. Um, and and kind of basically they're without reproach because we can't do anything about them. So we need to defeat them. And
Mm, yes.
that does absolutely nothing. It gets it so
It
people will go spend
polarizes.
more time on
Yeah.
your website, and so that they will see more ads and you make more money, which we know for a fact that's what these assholes are doing, because they admit it. But it does nothing for actually like trying to change minds or anything like that. So like with science, I don't know how you exactly do that. That to me, I think you do it just like what a teacher would do, which is try to make education really fun. Who the hell doesn't think dinosaurs are the coolest thing ever, right? Who does
Yeah.
not look up at the night sky? Well, we have so much light pollution, I guess, but who does not like see pictures of the night sky or the universe or whatever and not understand the insane natural beauty that is locked within that? Try to find that and like tell somebody like, hey, like, do you want to know how that works? Like, do you want to be connected with the universe? What the hell could be more like self-affirming and powerful and cool than that? And I mean, if that doesn't work, then like
Yeah, then good luck.
then,
Okay, no,
then
that's a
whatever.
really
You just
good
gotta
answer.
let you just gotta let some people be, I guess. But
Have you heard of the nitroplast?
oh, just a little bit. Yeah, new nitrogen fixing organelle, something that probably only ever.
Endosymbiotic.
Yeah.
It's a confirmed and third endosymbiotic organelle. Uh, I, for one, I study biochemistry, so this is like the coolest thing that's happened in our field since like penicillin. So I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on it. It doesn't sound like you have many.
Yeah, because I haven't read into it very much. I mean, I could sit here and wax poetically about endosymbiosis and Lynn Margulis and her amazing insight. It was basically kind of like a, I don't know, it was almost like a bet that I bet this is true, and that's the true, like science has true prophetic. Well, I mean, it just is prophetic. Real science that works is like that.
Mhm.
And so it just validates so much of what we now know about biology, especially with regard to evolution and whatever. But yeah, I mean, I don't know too much about the nitrogen. It's in a bacteria, or
Yeah.
is it in? Okay, so yeah, it's in a bacteria. So for
Well,
those
it's an archabact. Oh gosh, which bac?
archaea,
It's a eubacteria and an archaebacteria because we're more like the archaebacteria.
well, we're more like
It's a small one
archaea.
and a big one.
Yeah. Well, bacteria and archaea are two different kingdoms, which is fascinating. And we think we're more closely related to the archaea than the bacteria.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if it's in an archaea or a bacteria. But I mean, either way, it's really fascinating. And yeah, there's
is.
no yeah, I don't know. It's really fascinating. Just like for quicksies here, people don't know what we're talking about. Nitrogen fixation. If you buy fertilizer, the number one like micronutrient in your fertilizer is nitrogen because it's the hardest common element for plants to get because the atmosphere is 80% nitrogen, but no forms of life except special bacteria can do anything with it. You breathe it in and you breathe it right back out. It's not absorbed by any other organism and broken down because the chemical bond between the nitrogen is extremely strong. But there are certain bacteria, and I don't remember what they're just called nitrogen fixing bacteria. If they have another name, I don't know it. But plants, there are some plants that have a symbiotic relationship with them. We call them legumes, like soybeans. So if you grew up in the Midwest like me, or you grew up somewhere agricultural and you've ever noticed, how come it's corn one season and then beans the next season? How come this field, or if you don't know what you're looking at, how come the plants in this field are tall one summer and then short the next summer, and then tall the next summer and then short the next summer? Soybeans, peanuts, and a few other things, they have that bacteria so they can replenish the soil with nitrogen. Otherwise, you'll starve the soil of its nutrients and the plants can't grow. So, and then from here, what we talk about is Fritz Haber, who's one of the most important, one of the most important and monstrous people who ever lived. Fritz Haber figured out a way to tear nitrogen atoms apart from each other and make liquid ammonia out of it. And he's the reason around half the people alive today are alive. The world population has doubled 4 times since his invention. And it's just because we can grow enough food. That is the number one reason why 8 billion people live today. It's not because of medical advancements or anything like that. That helps. But he's the number one reason. But he was a monster.
Tell us the other half, Peter. What's the other half of his legacy?
He invented mustard gas. And then he invented Zyklon, but he had nothing to do with Nazi Germany. He hated them, and they kicked him out of the country. Well, I think he fled. And they took his invention, modified it slightly, and that was the most commonly used material to in gas chambers. So that one's not really his fault, but it directly ties or goes to him. Veritasium has a really good video about
That's where I
him.
learned about this one too. It's a fantastic video. The Veritasium Haber video. Highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't seen it yet. That was my first sciencey topic. It was a brief one. Secondly, some of your content deals with young Earth creationism, and I feed off of that. Um, I have not gone through your whole video catalog. Have you done a video on canine transmissible venereal tumor as a disproof of counts?
I have not, but I did write about that in my book, which is available on Amazon for $9.99 if you want the Kindle, or $24.99 on BookBaby. Just type in, the book is called Rational Answers to Stupid Questions. If you just type that in, it should take you there. But yeah, I love CTVT, CVT, whatever it is.
Canine transmissible venereal tumor.
I was right the first time. Yes, because canine transmissible venereal tumor is a single-celled organism that came from a dog. It's not only a change in kinds, it's a completely different sort of organism that came from a dog. So
It's fascinating. And
yeah,
like
I don't.
yeah.
I think I brought it up one time in a debate, and I don't remember what they said or anything. But I go into that in detail in my book because yes. So, quick science lesson for those of you listening: cancer comes from your own cells, right? Your own cells mutate, but you cut a cancer tumor off and it can't live without you. Well, and cancers are not contagious. There are just a couple of really tiny examples of transmissible cancers. And dogs have a venereal, which is to say it's kind of like an STD, but it's a cancer. So it's a cancer that originally developed on some dog wiener a long time ago. And the dogs pass it on to other dogs through intercourse. It's a transmissible cancer. But what we have now found out is that, because it's transmissible, the original cancer came from one dog, but it still exists in dog lineages today, which means that the cancer that dogs get from this comes from another dog that doesn't exist anymore. And that cancerous
It's genetically
tumor,
distinct.
yeah, and
I think
yeah,
that's the big one, is that it's really obviously genetically distinct
yes,
from that individual dog, but it is also undeniably, like, with 99.99% similarity, dog
yes.
genes
There,
that it's using.
yeah, it's clearly modified dog genes and chromosomes or whatever. Now, it can't exist without the dog, but no parasitic thing can exist without its host. So that's not an argument against it.
What is your opinion on the soft science, hard science thing?
Oh, like, is sociology science?
Yeah, sociology, psychology.
I don't know if I really have a strong opinion on this. I've been asked this before. I've never really known exactly what to say. Or, like, is political science, like, really a kind of science or whatever? I mean, the problem with, like, psychology and sociology, in sociology, I don't really know I couldn't, like, argue to you how it's quasi-scientific or, like, attempts to be scientific. I can for psychology, because, we do, like, brain studies, and we do adoptive twin studies, we do longitudinal studies, and we study, like, education, and, people take a test, and you front load them with information to see how that changes their cognition or whatever. I don't know how to tell you how sociology does that off the top of my head. I'm just ignorant about it, I guess. But I mean, obviously they use methods to try to be scientific. It's just that the background noise, for lack of a better term, in those fields is just absolutely enormous. So, for example, one of the most important books for, like, shaping my view of just kind of people, I guess, is this book called Blueprint by Robert Plomin. It's not a very long book. It's fascinating. And the book is mostly predicated on adoptive twin studies. So identical twins separated at birth. They share 100. So a lot of it's like the nature nurture debate, right? These adopted twins share 100% of their genes, but 0% of their environment. And then you compare the twins with each other. And then you compare the twins with like the families they live with. So they share 100% of the environment with their adoptive siblings, but 0% of the genes. And what do we find? We find that always, for virtually every single metric, including personality traits, the identical twins are always twice as similar to each other as they are to like their adoptive siblings. In fact, for it's way worse for the parents. So like I was actually looking up a study on this not too long ago. Like for IQ, for example, adopted children, their IQ correlates with their parents like anywhere between 4% and 17%, I believe it was. I know the lower end was 4%. So what does that tell us? Well, obviously things like personality traits and whatever, obviously genetics is a huge part of it. It's almost certainly like almost exactly 50% of it because of the fact that identical twins are virtually always twice as highly correlated as for adoptive siblings, and even fraternal twins, right? Actually, I might have this slightly wrong. I think it might be that identical twins are twice as similar to each other as they are to their I think I might have this slightly wrong. So you guys will have to read the book and check it out, but I think actually identical twins are twice as strongly correlated as they are with their real biological siblings, but that are not that they're obviously not twins with, because that's a case where they share the same environment but only have half the genes in common, right? So whatever, and then that would mean the correlations between kids and their adoptive siblings are even lower. Whatever, it doesn't matter. The point I'm trying to get here is, I started off talking about background noise or whatever. Obviously, the environment is massively important. It is like basically the entire missing piece of that, but we just have absolutely no idea exactly what it is or what we could do to shape it. Because what we find is what school you graduated from, how much money your parents make, whatever. Like for these twins that are separated at birth, it doesn't matter where they end up. They always end up being vastly more similar to each other than to anybody else that they shared that environment with. It's like you think you can impart things on people, but you can't. Like, if Olympic gold medalists adopted a child, they're not going to get that child to compete at that level. There's nothing they can do about that. And for like, traits like stubbornness or whatever, and openness and conscientiousness or whatever, you're just, obviously the environment is influencing that in a massive way, but it's a complete throw of the dice. You just have absolutely no idea what it's going to be. And that's the problem that we see in those kinds of studies. It's just so unpredictable. So what I've taken away from that in teaching and eventually in parenting is that forget about like the nature versus nurture thing. The only thing you should do, and even can do, that you have any hope in being effective, is to nurture their innate nature. Don't try to make them do things that are not in line with, what they're kind of born with and their natural inclinations. They'll never be successful that way.
What's your favorite like scientific type of like? What's your favorite area of biology like to study like CRISPR or what?
I don't like get into the nitty gritty of any. I don't zoom in really on anything super specific like that. But I just absolutely love genetics and evolution. Those are like of all the books I have more books about specifically evolution than anything. I don't really have very many just about genes. I mean, like it's present in quite a number of the books about evolution. or whatever. But to answer your first question, if I was going to do like a study or whatever, I would have studied the effects of cell phones on education, 100%, because I have very strong feelings about that.
Are you strongly against it, or are you strongly for it?
Very much against.
Oh. So, on that, do you just believe like they shouldn't be in a classroom?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
In your own classroom, do you allow people to be on their cell phones, or do you like can you do anything about
I
it?
have a thing at the front of the room that they just have to put their phones in. And
Damn.
people choose not to comply, and you try to do things about that, like, okay, well, you don't have like a restroom privileges, maybe, for example. Because you can deny that if you want to.
That's
you have license to do
crazy.
that as a teacher. Like, I can't ban them like in their next class or whatever. But it's just like, just follow the rules and we don't have this problem. And like, technically they can be like, I'm going and there's nothing you can do about it. It's like, that you are correct. That's fine. I'm just trying to steer you in the right direction. But what I'm going to do now is write you up for violating the school's cell phone policy. So just put it away and then you can do whatever you want and we won't have any problems. Like, you got to like try to be proactive and creative with this kind of stuff when you're a teacher. And it works. It works really well. Some people just will never follow any rules. That's always going to happen. So
I'm
you
gonna admit, I was
figure
wondering
out how
how
to
people-
have a productive student-teacher relationship with them anyways, but it's annoying.
So, do you only care about cell phones, or do you care about like AirPods and like headphones, stuff like that?
Oh no, I don't let them. I definitely don't let them wear those while I'm teaching. I've kind of moved away from direct lectures. I don't want them using them while they're studying independently either, because your brain, you can't multitask. You cannot do it. Okay. Now there are studies that say like classical music can be productive, whatever. Nobody's listening to that. Okay. And they say like it helps them relax or whatever. And it's like, that just tells me that you have a dependency on this and we need to work on that too. But anyways, there's a really fun demonstration. I end up doing it every year because there's a big brouhaha about this. I'm like, okay, I want somebody to come up to the whiteboard and I want you to sing the Itsy Bitsy Spider out loud while writing down the lyrics to Row, Row, Row Your Boat. It is so funny. I encourage all of you to do this now or like after a little bit. It's impossible. It's so funny because I'm telling you, like, guys, how often do you read something, a paragraph, and then you go, what did I just read? That happens when you're trying to pay attention, okay? And my classes are very difficult because it's just the nature of the subject. So it's like we need all the bandwidth we can get.
Okay, because I was wondering, like, a lot of people with ADHD, since they're chronically understimulated, and if they're not medicated, sometimes music I thought could help. Like with me, it would help just to have that in the background really quietly to help, like, have something else that I'm just not like getting distracted by.
Yeah, I can understand that it helps regulating, but I don't think that it's necessarily effective for learning. Because those are like obviously two very different things. Now I have some students that have like, they have a 504 or an IEP or whatever that says like they're allowed to like wear noise canceling headphones and whatever. And obviously I don't fight that or anything. And maybe they're listening to music and I'm like, well, you know what? You might be shooting yourself in the foot, but I'm going to let you make that mistake. And so like, we'll see what happens right away. And then they like bomb the first test and it's like, yeah, okay. So what are we going to do to change this? Right. So, teaching is an art. It's like cooking.
Yeah, a lot of teachers suck. Do you are you more of a hands-on teacher, or are you more of like the students are on their
own? I would say both. Because it's science, we try to be as experimental as we can. The shitty thing about it, though, is there is so much prerequisite knowledge that you have to have before you can like do, for example, a chemistry lab. Like we do titrations at the end of the year because it takes that long to build the prerequisite knowledge to understand why you're doing the titration. Now anybody, like a trained walrus, could mix chemicals together, but I make them like, calculate the molar mass and do the measurement themselves. And I say, I want this to be a 0.1 molar solution. You figure out how much of the chemical you need to dissolve in what volume of water to make it that. And that's real science. And they think that's really cool. But holy crap, it takes so long to do that because they come in and they don't know what an atom is. And so that's like where it begins, And it's a long journey to that kind of thing. But the middle sucks. But the end, they really like that. And it just makes the whole thing worth it.
All right, well, I just want to know more about like your teaching things and stuff like that. So I'm gonna head out now, but Hell Spanky.
Hail Spanky.
Amen.
Are there any flat earthers that are just stupid? Because it seems that no matter how much evidence and arguments you present to these people, they'll always find some way to reject it. I guess what do you think is driving these people?
Well, there's a couple different questions. So there's this guy who goes by Bob the Science Guy. He's been doing this kind of thing for a long time, like with flat earthers. And I can't remember if he's the one that came up with this, but I heard it from him first. He said there are two types of flat earthers. Ones that buy t-shirts and ones that sell t-shirts. So the joke there is it's just a giant grift, right? And so there are some of the stupidest sounding ones. I have the utmost confidence that they don't believe what they're saying. So I don't know if you know any of them by name, but like Flatzoid, Nathan Oakley, and Witsit, those guys don't think the earth is flat because they just say things that are contradictory or are so stupid that you can tell that they literally just made that up on the spot. And it's so full of holes that they obviously know that it's such a bad argument that it can't possibly make any sense. So, for example, those guys, it's like you have to show really hyper specific examples of that to demonstrate it. And I'm not going to unpack that here, but are there some that are stupid? Yeah. I've met so many of them. There's, oh, damn it. What's his name? Oh shoot. I can see his face, but I cannot remember what his name is, but I'll share with you a couple of stories about this dummy. He one time he lost the moon. Okay, he was driving around and was doing a live stream, and he was pointing his phone camera at the moon, and then all of a sudden he's like, "Where did it go?" And he couldn't find it. He lost the moon, and to him this proved that it's a hologram, that the lizard Illuminati or whatever are controlling it, and they can turn it off and on whenever they want, make it change directions or whatever. Because he just, I don't know, it went behind a cloud or something. I don't know. It was just so unbelievably stupid. Derek, that's his name. Derek something. I don't remember the rest. But yeah, he lost the moon one time. He could not find it. But this other thing he did was he, in order to claim that the globe is fake, right? Because the globe model, it doesn't even work. For example, did you know that one time the sun set over the Atlantic Ocean? And you hear that and you're like, wait, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Because we have an American perspective bias. And it's the sun rises over the Atlantic and it sets over the Pacific. So you have to then think for 2 seconds and be like, wait a minute, the sun always sets over the Atlantic if you live in Africa, for example. But his claim was, no, this happened in North America. So at first we were like, okay, how on earth are you sitting here seriously bringing that up, not realizing that if that had actually happened, literally every single person on the entire planet, it's the only thing they would talk about because it would be the most nonsensical thing that ever happened. the sun literally going in the opposite direction this one time, but it never then rose in the west and changed directions, so on and so forth. So what we came to find out is, it's kind of hard to do without a map, but on the east coast of the United States, off the coast of North Carolina, there are what are called barrier islands. So they're many, many miles out into the ocean, and it's just this really narrow strip of islands. A lot of people kind of know about, like, in Florida, the Key Islands, like Key West. There's just this strip of islands that go on like that. You have this same sort of thing in North Carolina. So anyways, if you're on one of those islands, then there's this big stretch of ocean between you and the mainland continental United States. And so the sun would set over the Atlantic Ocean from where you are. And we figured out that that's where this photograph or whatever that he had was from. And we're just like, how did you run with this? Like, how are you so unbearably naive and just so irresponsible to have been like, I've discovered it, and to think that you discovered something that somehow eluded every single person on the planet. You'd have to be an idiot to do that. So there are, I'm sure there are, there's this guy who goes by Iron Horse. He's done some debates, like on Modern Day Debate on YouTube. Look up his arguments and his stuff. I've talked to him a couple times. One of my videos is the return of Flat Jesus, because he goes by that sometimes too. And I talked to him. The other one, I don't remember what it's called, but that guy was really just incredibly stupid. But the dumbest one, I think, out there, at least that I know of, and it's not even close, is son of a bitch, I don't remember his name. It is, I can look it up. Howard Stirrup like on a saddle. Howard, you watch his stuff on Modern Day Debates, and he's not just a flat earther. He thinks that dragons existed. He thinks that creatures literally the size of mountains used to walk around, and he points to pictures of mountains that, if you close your eyes and don't look, kind of look like an animal, and he says that that's evidence of it. And he says every rock that is vaguely heart-shaped is a fossilized heart, because there's like some legend about that or something. That guy is as crazy as it gets. He's just so dumb. So yeah, look him up if you want to. It might make you mad how dumb he is, though. That's the thing with these flat earthers. It just makes you angry how dumb they can be.
First, I was going to ask, how do you suggest is the easiest way to bring somebody down to like rationale in those flat earth debates?
You probably can't, but what I do, my technique in my debates, I don't know if you've seen them or whatever, is...
No, it's the first time I've heard about you.
That's fine. What I try to do is I try to demonstrate that they don't believe what they're saying. I think that's the most powerful tool, because they'll say things like, water doesn't bend, or water always finds its level. Okay. And they'll point to a glass of water to prove that. And you say to them, if Earth were flat, there would still be tides, high and low tides, which means the water has to, by definition, not be level. It has to be higher somewhere and lower in another place. So you don't believe what you're saying, right?
Sure.
The most common one, and this is like young Earth creationists and evolution deniers, same thing. They'll say it's not true, or it hasn't been proven, it's just a theory. They'll say such and such isn't true, it's just a theory. And I actually had a debate like this pretty recently. It's infuriating, but kind of funny. I just asked them if atoms and subatomic particles exist. Nobody has ever said no. And then you explain to them how that is a theory. It's called atomic theory. You cannot observe atoms. It's not possible. We only have indirect evidence of them. But they believe that they exist. So they don't believe that theory means not true. They regard certain scientific theories as true and proven facts, and they just like cherry pick with other ones. That one's really effective with the young Earth creationists too, and evolution deniers, because they.
Hey, you got background noise, Chipotle. Let's go ahead and push the talk real fast.
Yeah, I just muted you real quick. They, the vast majority of them are not flat earthers. So it's more effective with them because then you can use like gravity and general relativity and Earth orbiting the sun rather than the other way around or whatever as theories that they regard as true. And so then it's like, yep, so why are we cherry picking? Why do we have selective beliefs for these? And they always fall apart there, and it's much hilarity ensues.
I'm very curious as to your thoughts and beliefs as to the systems in place. Like what do you believe is the best way to not only build human organization, if you will, and if you have an explanation to why the current rich people or the current hierarchies are in place, if you will. I don't know if I'm sounding very coherent, but yeah.
I mean, I think I know what you mean. I have kind of a boring answer. I honestly think the framers of the Constitution had like one of the absolute best ideas ever. I think it's no accident that pretty much every single country that has replaced their autocracy or monarchy or whatever with some form of representative government has basically copied the American idea. Now, there are huge problems in America, and it's kind of like the second part of what you're talking about. I think the problem with that is literally as simple as greed. And the greed is, on the part of the people with the money and the power and whatever. But they've also gotten into bed with people that make the laws. So they have rigged the game in their favor. But like when people talk about that science has been used to do horrible things, my answer to that is not to revert back to the Stone Age. So science can't hurt us anymore. My answer is better science. And I think the only way to, the best way to fix the system we have, because I think inherently it is probably the best system you can have, because it has checks and balances and incentives set up in a particular way or whatever. I think the best way to do that is with more of the same type of representative system or whatever. Like, for example, amending the Constitution. That is something that's perfectly valid to do. I don't think we need to abolish the patriarchy or have anarchy or anything like that. And you hear like weird stuff from every end. I mean, like radical people on the left, they say like we just need to tear it down because it's inherently oppressive and whatever. People on the far right, like libertarians, think or anarchists, which is kind of the same thing. It's like they just want to live in a world where everybody drinks water with lead in it and we all die and we never have any quality of life improvements. But at least the goddamn government won't be telling me what to do. I saw a really, really funny comment today on a TikTok video. The TikTok video was like some AI thing, like narrating like a libertarian's paradise. And it's like the libertarian wakes up and just like in 20 different instances, because of lack of regulation, the libertarian like dies or is poisoned or is maimed or is taken advantage of, and they can't do anything about it because they don't have enough money to bribe somebody who's powerful or a private security firm or whatever, because there's no police to do anything about it. And the comment was, libertarians be like, tyranny.gov? No. Tyranny.com? Yes. And I was like, yeah, you know what? In very simple terms, I think that explains it pretty well. So that's my very long-winded answer.
Would you not say that, at least in our current system, that there are classes of people that are inherently, one might say, unjust? Like, for example, there are people who will always make their money through working for a living, and there are people who make their money by owning stuff for a living.
Right.
And that class is determined by your birth, pretty much.
Yeah, and there's something like cosmically. Can you mute yourself again? Sorry. There is something that just seems like cosmically unfair about that, but I don't think it's immoral or unjust just because it's not fair. Because if we take that logic to its extreme, there are people that are born without arms or legs. So should we either abort all fetuses that can be determined to not have arms or limbs, or should we cut the arms and limbs off of everybody? So like what I'm sort of doing is like saying like, okay, if we're going with this, the pipe dream of equity rather than like equality, then it will always be absurd, and there will always be something ridiculous that we can argue about it, because it'll never be equitable. And the only way to even approach the only way to even approach something remotely equitable, like on a really like grand scale, is with totalitarian control. That's the only thing you could possibly do about it. And while I think that there are many things about our system that are deeply unfair, I wouldn't call it like necessarily unjust. And like my proof of that would just be the immense amount of progress that we've been able to make just, since the founding of this country. And some of that's because of the advancements of science. But, a lot of it is through just making good decisions in like the way we structure and organize our societies. Because the thing about like technology feeds in with this too, and science feeds in with this in a big way, but like legislation does too. Those advancements, they always lift up the bottom, because the quality of life for the rich and the fat cats or whatever has always been the highest among anybody in the world at any point in time. It always is. Advancements always lift up the bottom, and we have done more for people at the bottom than people at the top. Now, what I can imagine people are screaming about in response to that is, like, for example, income inequality has just grown to an absolutely disgusting level over the past since about the 80s, right? And yes, that is true. However, still, the people at the bottom live longer, healthier, more productive lives that they derive greater meaning out of than at any point in history at the same time, right? So, like, it sucks, but we're not doing that bad is kind of what I would say.
Okay, I understand your position on this sort of cosmically unjust, but my answer to that would be that these systems in place are not created by the cosmos. They're man-made, pretty much. We choose who gets to own the companies and not. We built these governments and systems ourselves. You can argue that, for example, some of these stuff are 200 years old or whatever. But to me, it seems like, for example, Elon Musk's son will always do better than you, even if you might be smarter than him, or even if you might have more merit than Elon Musk's son. But through the sheer injustice of him being born to a billionaire, a multi-billionaire, he's ahead of you in that game. Would you say that's not a meritocratic system? And could we change that in the future?
So, like, I've heard people say, like, I don't know if they call it like the death tax or whatever. It's like, I get the idea that being born to a rich person is just completely unfair, like, in a way. But I just don't think that the government should have the right to literally take away everything that you have and disallow you to bequeath it to your children or whatever, or even 99% of what you have.
Clarify, I don't mean the government should take away everything that you have. I just believe that, for example, out of the $200 billion that Elon Musk have, I don't think if $1 million of it goes to his son, that it would completely destroy his son's life. I think you can live on $1 million a pretty
No, I agree.
chill life, you know?
Yeah, I agree. But I don't know. It's kind of a slippery slope thing. Like, if we're okay with doing like this much, then why not just like all of it or whatever. But just completely separate from that, I guess I would just kind of say, the weird thing about this is we are being super, when we're focusing on this, we are being super elitist because we're saying it's better to be filthy, stinking rich than not. Now, it affords you like advantages, and if we have a system where people with money are doing corrupt things and the system we have is inherently working against just regular working class or poor people or whatever, then I understand like the sentiment, or like maybe like trying to do something better about that. But no, I mean, I wouldn't say that it's not worse to be poor. Like, your life isn't less valuable because you are poor. You can say that you're probably not going to live as long. Well, you certainly are not. Well, at least the odds are that you're not going to live as long, and some other things. But it is kind of a little bit like not like, and I believe in like redistributive programs and stuff like that, but it is a little bit snobbish and kind of like entitled to be like, more people should have more money, you know? I just want to make sure that we're not going there.
I understand where you're coming from, and I agree with it when we were talking about the ultra rich. You know, you're buying your second yacht and your second mansion, but for most people, that money isn't about getting what they want; it's about getting what they need. And for example, water and food are needs, are universal human needs. You need water, I need water. Everyone watching the stream needs water. And when we were talking about money, it would be nice if our economy wasn't structured in a way that it tries to like um, aim towards people's wants and more so people's needs. But unfortunately, the philosophers that made our economy did not take that into account. So, if, for example, you'd feed 100 million people by just taking the 200 billion off of Elon Musk and just leaving his son with $1 million, would you not do it? Is my question.
I mean, I might, but I don't find that to be actually. I find that to be more of a band-aid rather than a like a proactive solution to anything. Like, we could end homelessness if we spend too much money on our military budget, obviously, right? We could cut it by 90% and be fine. Obviously, we'd probably actually be safer because we wouldn't be meddling in foreign affairs and people wouldn't hate us as much. Now, you could use that money to solve homelessness in our country. Except that doesn't address root causes, right? Now, when it comes to like the whole idea of like what is a government's obligation to do, I would say to guarantee safety, security to people, and to grant them what we call their inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, I think what goes along with that is like people should be. I don't think the government should provide 100% of our housing or your food allotment or anything like that. But the system should exist that a person can support themselves without working 18 hours a day to be able to do that. If we can have a system that works in that way and can also incentivize like people being able to like have a family and afford to have a family so that we can continue existing, then we don't need to do, and I don't think we need to do that much more than that. if that makes sense. And then going back to the thing you said about like the philosophers that founded this country didn't like set it up that way, whatever. Well, that's because that long ago, the amount of power that one person could wield was just simply nothing remotely like on the magnitude of what people can do today. Big part of that's because of technology, right? Like we literally wield mechanical power, but now we wield this interconnected sort of like manipulative, gather people, resources, ideas, and money or whatever through, the internet and whatever else. They couldn't have envisioned that, and that's not really their fault. But again, I think the fix for that is to use the system that they put in place to fix it, right? So, like, for example, I think the Supreme Court has the Citizens United ruling completely wrong. I think that's been catastrophic for the country, and I think if we got rid of that, that would be one step in the right direction. Term limits for people in the government would be another step in the right direction. Something about like, I don't know, like now we have because of Citizens United, we now have super PACs. So now you've just given more power to, people that have all of the money. I think we can fix it by using the system we have in the way it was like designed to be used, basically.